Begin today with two environmental disasters which have citizens near Los Angeles, California, as well as Flint, Michigan, in a panic. The impoverished city of Flint, Michigan's 100,000 residents have been exposed to water filled with lead, linked to the city's decision to take tap water from the Flint River in a bid to save money. In California, an estimated 77 million kilograms of methane gas have been released since a leak was first reported on October 23rd by the Southern California Gas Company. Now, these stories aren't getting much attention from the mainstream media, but
Toxic water has been coming out of Flint taps for nearly 2 years. State officials used to tell residents the water was clean, even when they showed how yellow it was.
The only thing that you ever heard from anybody was everything was okay, everything was okay, everything was okay.
In April of 2014, authorities switched Flint from cleaner Detroit water to Flint River water as a way to cut costs.
Our voices are not as heard as they would be in a more affluent area.
Because we don't have money.
We don't count.
Only after pediatrician Monahana Atisha alerted the media about high levels of lead in children here did the state switch back to a cleaner source. But the river water was so corrosive to the local pipes that they're still leaching lead. The pediatrician told me that this exposure to lead may have poisoned thousands of children in Flint.
There's no treatment. There's no antidote. Once lead is in your body, it's in your body. It already causes that neurotoxicity. It damages your nervous system. It impacts cognition and it impacts behavior. So it drops children's IQ scores. And then it has these behavioral implications, attention deficit, hyperactivity, conduct disorders. It's even been linked to criminality.
The local government decided to save some money and has done that in large part at the expense of the most vulnerable. Flint is very poor. These are low-income families. Over 40% of the population lives below the poverty line. You see abandoned houses everywhere. So on top of all these challenges, they got toxic water, which doctors say could have irreversible consequences for the health of their children.
I did drink the water fountain water and it tasted kind of like little.
Yeah, well,
weird.
we told you not to drink that water.
Michigan's governor vows to do whatever it takes to end Flint's water emergency. Rick Snyder apologized Tuesday for the government response in his State of the State address. He also said he'd release his 2014 and 2015 emails showing when he knew about the lead contamination.
Jail to the chief! Jail to the chief!
Hundreds of protesters outside the State House called on Snyder to resign. Adriana Diaz is in Flint, where the governor is deploying more than 100 additional National Guard members. Adriana, good morning.
Good morning. During his speech last night, Governor Snyder said that no one in Flint would go without clean water. All of these cases you see here will be gone by midday. So far, nearly 40,000 cases of clean water have been given out. That's nearly 1 million bottles.
Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Snyder's got to go!
Protesters outside Michigan State House endured below freezing temperatures as they called for the governor's resignation Tuesday night.
Snyder's got to go!
I'm sorry, and I will fix it.
The governor didn't do his job. He's been lying all along.
Before protesting at the State House, Tony and Leah Palladino showed us their corroded pipes.
It's almost like we're in a third world country. We got filters that don't work. I don't care what they say, people. These filters, they do not work.
A tale of two crises in two Michigan cities cried out for the nation's attention today and got it. The governor asked the president to declare a disaster in Flint where lead has contaminated the water. And Detroit's public schools closed today when teachers staged a sick-out to protest what they say are dangerous buildings. First, Omar Villafranca in Detroit.
Hundreds of Detroit teachers who called in sick today were instead protesting outside of the Detroit Auto Show, where President Obama was a guest.
I have to take a stand.
Monica Tyson teaches elementary and junior high students.
Our mindset is always to be there for the children and make sure that they have the best education possible. But at the same time, we have to also stand up for their rights because they can't speak for themselves.
The planned sick-out affected nearly 45,000 students and shut down 91% of Detroit public schools.
Stand up, fight back!
Teachers are upset about recent pay cuts and what they are calling deplorable conditions at their schools. These photos show just some of the problems: heavily damaged ceilings and roofs, maggots in the toilets, mice sharing rooms with students, and at one point, mushrooms were growing inside a classroom. 9-year-old Julia Murray says the furnace at her school is broken.
One time our teachers allowed us to wear a coat, but she wasn't supposed to, but she did it anyway because she was cold herself.
Because the district is $515 million in the red, schools are now run by a state-appointed emergency manager.
A U.S. government watchdog has found that a Pentagon agency wasted millions of dollars on reconstruction projects in Afghanistan. A Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction, John Sopko, says that poor planning and wasting of funds mar the projects in the war-torn country. Sopko made the remarks during a briefing before senators from the Special Committee on Military Management. The Democrat Claire McCaskill of Missouri criticized the Pentagon for spending over $43 million on natural gas filling station. Pentagon's disputed the finding. A task force for business and stability operations spent some $800 million on Afghan projects over a 5-year period. The task force has since been abandoned.
The executive actions that the President announced 2 weeks ago, including the measures that I recommended to him, are essential components of this effort. They are important steps that are within the executive's power to clarify existing legal provisions, to focus enforcement efforts, and to spur innovation. I have complete confidence that the common sense steps announced by the President are lawful. They are consistent with the Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court and the laws passed by Congress.
But the point is, to me anyway, when it comes to LGBT rights in the workplace, the world is looking to you. I know that sounds like hyperbole, sounds like an exaggeration, but they look to you. You have more impact than anything the federal government has done, or the Supreme Court of the United States has done, or that Barack Obama and Joe Biden have done, or lighting up the White House. You have more impact. You have more impact in the countries around the world than we do on those social issues. You literally can change the terms of the debate. I don't mean overnight, but literally collectively you can change the terms of the debate and shift some public opinion. You actually put governments on notice.
The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are investigating a Kent State University professor, allegedly for supporting ISIS. 55-year-old Julio Pino, an associate history professor at the school, has not been charged with any crime. The investigation apparently has been underway for a year and a half and is focused on whether he tried to recruit students to ISIS. In an interview, Pino was asked directly if he considers himself a supporter of the terror group, and he said no. He says he's just exercising his freedom of speech.
I'm not under any kind of criminal investigation. I'm not under any kind of suspicion. I haven't been served any papers. So, I'm sure there were stories circulating out there. People may take them with as much of a grain of salt as they want to. But my current status is that I'm a citizen of the United States with all the rights and obligations that entails. I follow the law. I advocate that others do so also, and I ask others to respect my freedom of speech as I respect theirs.
Pino is no stranger to controversy, posting pictures like this of child jihadists on his public Facebook page. And while he denies supporting ISIS and says that he never incited any of his students to violence, a review of his Facebook page turns up a posting in which he praises Osama bin Laden as the, quote, greatest. Ryan Morrow is a professor and national security analyst with the Clarion Project who's been doing some digging on Professor Pino. Good to see you, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, so the FBI is confirming its investigation into this man?
Right.
On the record?
Well, there's been anonymous statements by FBI agents, and then I'm not sure if there was a public statement, but what he is saying is that, look, I haven't been arrested yet, and I haven't been informed that I am the subject of an investigation.
They think he's recruiting for ISIS?
Right, recruiting students for ISIS, actually using his position as a professor in order to find recruits. And when I was looking at his Facebook page, I found many indications of extremism, including posting pictures that are supportive of ISIS and saying that Al-Qaeda, which was once led by the great Osama bin Laden, in his words, and kicked off this current jihad, supporters of him should now join ISIS because they're now the ones that are the best jihadists.
He talks about the oath that the, quote, 19 martyrs made was a glorious oath among the most noble oaths, among others. But I mean, it goes on and on and on. He's been doing this for years. How has he survived at Kent State this long?
Well, here's what's really shocking, is that his first statement that he was noticed for, which supported terrorism, where he was praising suicide bombings, happened in 2002. And so there's been controversy surrounding this individual all the way back then, but the university has not fired him. And so what I really want to know is, why aren't you firing him? And if there's a reason that you cannot do so legally, explain that. Because right now, all we're hearing from the university leadership is that, well, we condemn these statements, and the FBI assures us that there's no threat to the campus.
The university says free speech. This is free speech, and these are his viewpoints.
We're going to protect Christianity, and I can say that. I don't have to be politically correct. And if you look what's going on throughout the world, you look at Syria, where if you're Christian, they're chopping off heads. You look at the different places, and Christianity, it's under siege.
Joining us now from Des Moines, Iowa, is Mr. Trump. So let's stay in the USA for this discussion. Do you believe Christianity here is under siege?
Absolutely. You just take a look at what's going on, even from something that is less important but very important to a lot of people, including me, the words Merry Christmas. You go to a department store today, you don't see Merry Christmas anymore. We're under siege. We're losing ground. Christians are losing ground in this country. Now, you get outside of the country and they want to come into this country, as you know, whether it's ISIS or anybody else, and you have the heads being chopped off. We are definitely under siege.
How does a president of the United States change the culture of secularism? Because that's what this is all about. It's about, we don't want judgments in religion. It's not just Christianity, it's all religion. We don't want judgments. We want to be secular. And how does a president change that?
Well, I think you have to change it almost with a different spirit than we have. We don't have that spirit anymore. You know, we have a president that is much more committed, in my opinion, to Iran than he's committed to Israel, as an example. Much more committed to certain things that you or certainly me would not be committed to than what he would be according to what we believe. And you look at things that are happening within the country, outside of the country, but little things like...
A major diplomatic breakthrough between the United States and Iran Saturday. Officials from both countries confirming that Iran was releasing 4 detained Iranian Americans Saturday in exchange for 7 Iranians held or charged in the U.S. A 5th American detained in Iran, a student identified as Matthew Travithnik, was released independently of the exchange. U.S. officials confirmed that Washington Post reporter Jason Rezaian, former U.S. Marine Amir Hekmati, Pastor Saeed Abedini, and Nosratollah Khosravi, whose name had not been previously made public, were to be flown from Iran to Switzerland and then transported to a U.S. military hospital in Germany for medical treatment. Families felt relief.
And so as soon as I got confirmation that Saeed was released, I woke up my kids. It was probably around 7:30 in the morning. I woke them up and I told them that Daddy will be coming home, and they just jumped up and they were dancing up and down, and just I could see heavy burden lifted off their little shoulders.
And on the campaign trail, reaction was mixed.
And I'm happy they're coming back, but I will tell you, it's a disgrace that they've been there for so long. It's a disgrace.
While we celebrate their return, this deal serves as a piece of propaganda for both Iran and the Obama administration.
The prisoner swap came as the International Atomic Energy Agency was certifying that Iran had met all commitments under the nuclear deal with 6 world powers.
Governor, it's great to see you. What's your take on the release of our hostages from Iran?
I'm delighted that they're going to be released. I mean, there's no way to express any other emotion for the hostages and their families. But that's just it. They were hostages. They were not prisoners. They weren't there because they'd committed some international crime for which they had been justly tried. They were being held hostages by a government that we just made a deal with and just released $100 billion, maybe up to $150 billion. This is not a good deal because this wasn't a deal. This was, we were basically paying ransom is what it really came down to.
And Governor Huckabee, we just had Ambassador John Bolton on the program earlier, and he said this basically incentivizes Iran to do it again, or for other governments around the world, terrorist organizations around the world, to take Americans hostage and then have, a price on their head. Do you agree?
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, this is an invitation to go and find an American, hold him hostage, come up with some phony charges, hold him for a few years, humiliate the United States of America, and then demand something of ridiculously high value, and know that as long as this administration is in power, you're going to get it, because they're so anxious to make a deal with the Iranians. And for what reason? I've never been able to understand it. The Iranians, in 37 years of the Ayatollahs, have never been trustworthy. They've never kept a deal. To this moment, they still haven't actually signed a deal. This is one of those just amazing and inexplicable actions of this administration as to why they would want to create that level of danger and disruption in the Middle East that's already unstable enough.
This is a good day because once again, we're seeing what's possible with strong American diplomacy. As I said in my State of the Union address, ensuring the security of the United States and the safety of our people demands a smart, patient, and disciplined approach to the world. That includes our diplomacy with the Islamic Republic of Iran. For decades, our differences with Iran meant that our governments almost never spoke to each other. Ultimately, that did not advance America's interests. Over the years, Iran moved closer and closer to having the ability to build a nuclear weapon. But from Presidents Franklin Roosevelt to John F. Kennedy to Ronald Reagan, the United States has never been afraid to pursue diplomacy with our adversaries. And as president, I decided that a strong, confident America could advance our national security by engaging directly with the Iranian government.
You lost confidence in the United States?
We don't have confidence in Iran. We have confidence in the United States.
What do you need? What do you want Iran to do now to restore diplomatic relations?
Very simple. Iran should cease interfering in the affairs of the countries of the region. Iran should cease to support terrorism. Iran should cease to assassinate diplomats and blow up embassies. Iran should cease to support militias whose objective is to destabilize countries in the region. Iran should cease its policy of negative propaganda in the region. Other than that, things should be fine with Iran.
Are you okay with the billions of dollars that Iran is about to get as a result of the nuclear deal?
Wolf, I think most countries in the world are not okay with it. I think most countries in the world are concerned that Iran will use these funds in order to fund its nefarious activities rather than use them to develop its country and improve the living standards of its people. I hope I'm wrong.
A high-ranking Iranian commander says enhancing missiles and defense capabilities is a priority for the Iranian armed forces. The deputy chairman of the chiefs of staff of the armed forces said the process of production of weapons and arming troops still continues with the same determination. Brigadier General Masoud Jazayeri stressed that the process has never been stopped, not even for a moment. The high-ranking commander said Iran's ability to defend itself will not be affected by any negotiation or diplomatic interaction. He stressed that armed forces are increasing their vigilance day by day to counter any possible threats. Head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran says the construction of 2 nuclear power plants, each with a capacity of 1,000 megawatts, will start soon. Ali Akbar Saleh has said that under the nuclear deal between Iran and the P5+1 group of countries, which took effect 2 days ago, world countries are obliged to contribute to Iran's nuclear development plans. He further stated that several European and Asian countries, including China, Japan, and South Korea, have already said they're ready for nuclear cooperation with Iran. Saleh added that Iran is also planning to build 2 additional nuclear power plants in cooperation with China. The issue will be discussed during the Chinese president's upcoming visit to Tehran.
Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to Israel slams Tel Aviv's lack of action and double standards in dealing with the settlers' violence against Palestinians in the occupied territories.
Too many attacks on Palestinians, lack of vigorous investigation or response by Israeli authorities, too much vigilantism goes unchecked, and at times there seem to be 2 standards of adherence to the rule of law, one for Israelis and another for Palestinians.
Speaking at a conference organized by the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv, the U.S. ambassador pointed out that a 2-state solution is the only way to resolve the decades-long conflict in the Middle East. Shapiro added that Washington was, quote, concerned and perplexed in the wake of Israel's settlement expansion policies. He noted that Tel Aviv's continued settlement growth has raised serious questions about its long-term intentions.
International charity Oxfam released a report on the growing gulf between the world's richest and poorest. It's titled, quote, An Economy for the 1%. And it concludes that the wealthiest 62 people on the planet own as much as the poorest half of the world's population combined. It also found that those 3.6 billion people have become 41% poorer since 2011.
What we're really talking about today as Oxfam is a more structural problem that allows this kind of wealth inequality to exist. What we found in our report is that this sort of inequality is increasingly hardwired into our economies. It's the way that we run things now. We have vast income inequality, but that also cuts across huge gender inequalities. Political leaders, business leaders, billionaires themselves are waking up to the fact that this is not good news for anybody. It undermines our economies, it undermines our societies.
The world's wealthy movers and shakers have gathered in the ski resort of Davos as plunging oil prices and turbulent markets fuel fears of a brand new economic meltdown. RT's Daniel Bushell now reporting from Switzerland, where the World Economic Forum kicks off today.
Mastering the fourth industrial revolution is this year's official slogan. Mastering economic collapse might now be more accurate. 2016's powwow for the masters of the universe here is overshadowed by what could be a worse meltdown than 08. The price of oil, the great lubricator of the world's economy, this week slumped to a pathetic $27 a barrel. Last time that happened, top of the charts was a song called Lose Yourself. Eminem might consider re-releasing it in tribute to business chiefs here losing their profits and soon maybe even their jobs. Cheap petrol's good for us at the pumps, but millions in the industry could find themselves out of work if it's just not worth pumping the black gold out of the ground. So stock markets have fallen out the ugly tree, hitting every branch on the way down. Wall Street had its worst start to a year in history. And in a capitalist crisis, it's survival of the fittest or the best connected. All this week, we'll be grilling world leaders here how they plan to get us out of this mess. It's in their interest. With $3 trillion wiped off shares this year, the billionaires gathered here are suffering a considerable dent to their fortunes.
On to story number 4. The International Monetary Fund has lowered its outlook for global economic growth this year. The IMF expects the global economy to grow 3.4% in 2016. The figure is an improvement compared to last year, but 0.2% lower than a previous estimation. The Monetary Fund has warned of substantial risks in major emerging market economies and slower growth in China and a stronger U.S. dollar. It's also cited that low oil prices and political turmoil in the Middle East could hamper global economic recovery. Regarding Europe, the IMF said that the refugee crisis poses alarming challenges to the bloc as it tries to restart growth. And it expects Latin America to be dragged into a recession by a sharp contraction in the Brazilian economy.
It was another wild ride today on Wall Street. The Dow plunged more than 500 points, but recovered nearly half of that, closing with a loss today of 249. Falling oil prices have investors rattled.
It's been a bad time for Italian banks. Shares in two of them plunged to record lows this year, sinking under the weight of weak capital and risky loans. That problem saddles the whole system. Italian banks hold billions of dollars in bad debt. Italy's Prime Minister says the country needs fewer and stronger players.
It is clear that the world of banks in Italy have the chance and need to make significant changes.
But the European Commission is yet to agree on how that's implemented. Rome wants to allow bad loans to be put into separate entities. However, tighter EU rules may not allow it. With a struggling economy, a weak banking sector is the last thing Italy needs, says CMC Markets' Michael Hewson.
Have European regulators dealt with the problems, the NPLs, the non-performing loans of European banks? The answer to that question is no. Until such times as they do, that's going to act as a significant brake on European economic growth prospects, simply because the banks basically supply the juice to oil the wheels of the European economy.
Talks on how to resolve Italy's banking crisis are due later this week.
Economic and social emergency is declared in France as the country struggles with high unemployment and stagnant growth.
I believe that faced with a global situation of economic uncertainty and persistent unemployment, we must also announce an economic and social state of emergency. I am disappointed as growth remains too slow.
The French President François Hollande made the announcement in an annual address to business leaders in Paris. The measures include more than $2 billion in subsidies and programs to boost youth unemployment. Hollande's socialist government has struggled to reduce the chronic unemployment, which has been at 10% for years. France is already under a state of emergency since terrorist attacks in November.
We shall overcome someday.
More than half a century since Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech, the protesters for minimum wage are walking the very same streets, the very same premises where that speech was made, the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Now, the demand is quite simple.
What do airport workers want? $15 and a union!
The $15 minimum wage, and we have here the men and women who are running airports across the country. This particular case, it's the Reagan Airport in Washington, D.C.
They're getting paid like $6, so they need to get a raise and a union support, which is about $15 an hour. I mean, every year, everything gets more expensive year after year after year, and constantly living on $6. You can't really keep up with the work. You have to either move state or move the part of town that you live, or go to a different district where the wages are lower or the lifestyle is lower. So as long as everybody comes together and say, listen, we're not going to go to work today, the airport is going to stop. So that's all they got to do. Just don't go to work today, and they will get the airport to stop, and they have to they will get what they're looking for.
The movement, which has been gathering pace across the United States over the last 18 months or so, uniting basically workers from all industries, from fast food to childcare, and now the airport workers have joined the movement as well. Now, their slogans are obviously flight-related: destination justice and poverty wages do not fly. This movement now today unites a number of airports across the country. We know that the New York LaGuardia Airport is on strike as well, the airport in Chicago, in Seattle, and there's about a dozen airports across the country protesting against wage inequality and demanding the wages to be raised.
Demonstrators demanding jobs clashed with police for a second day in the Tunisian city of Kasserine. Police lobbed tear gas. Protesters fired back with rocks. Large crowds burned tires and chanted "Work, Freedom, Dignity" during the violent protests after an unemployed man killed himself, apparently when he was rejected for a job. Katha Rahimi has been unemployed since 2012. Her diploma in services and administration is as useless as the paper it's printed on. We're a family of 8. My sister has a university degree and works as a street cleaner, she said. Supporting 8 people, can you imagine? At the end of 2015, unemployment in the country was over 15%, with university grads making up 1/3 of the unemployed.
Astrophysicist Stephen Hawking, who's portrayed in the movie The Theory of Everything, says the Earth as we know it is doomed. The University of Cambridge professor made those comments while recording a BBC special to air later this month. Hawking was asked whether he thinks the world would end naturally or if man would destroy it first, and he said, although the chance of a disaster to planet Earth in a given year may be quite low, it adds up over time and becomes a near certainty in the next 1,000 or 10,000 years. By that time, we should have spread out into space and to other stars, so a disaster on Earth would not mean the end of the human race. However, we will not establish self-sustaining colonies in space for at least the next 100 years, so we have to be very careful in this period. But your burning scope won't help you on that front.
And we're following breaking news, a terror attack on a university in Pakistan. At least 20 people are dead. Gunmen opened fire on students and staff early today on the campus in the northwestern part of the country. Dozens of people are wounded. Holly Williams is following developments from Istanbul, Turkey. Holly, good morning.
Good morning. The group of armed men stormed Bahçekan University around 9:30 a.m. local time, just after classes had begun, attacking students and staff members in classrooms and also a dormitory. Witnesses reportedly heard gunfire and explosions coming from the campus. A Pakistani military spokesman told us that 4 of the militants were killed after the police and soldiers moved in. Video from the aftermath shows the dead and wounded being ferried to the hospital. This university is in a lawless region of Pakistan, which has long been a haven for militants. This attack will bring back memories of an assault on a school in the same area in 2014, in which nearly 150 people were killed, most of them children. The Pakistani Taliban claimed responsibility for that massacre, but it's still unclear who's behind today's attack.
Epicenter was monitored at 33 kilometers northwest of Menyuan County in Qinghai Province at a depth of 10 kilometers. And tremors were felt in Xining, the provincial capital, and also in the nearby Gansu Province and Ningxia Autonomous Region. Authorities say the earthquake hit a sparsely populated mountain area, and there have been no reports of casualties so far, just some damage to local homes. Local telecom services remain fully functional. In the 2 hours after the earthquake, up to 86 aftershock had been registered, with the highest at a 3.9 magnitude. China's earthquake administration and its provincial bureau in Qinghai have activated a high-level 2 emergency response, with armed police and medical staff mobilized.
Hey everybody, good morning. Quarter till the top of the hour. Happy Sunday. Well, a Michigan woman capturing a glimpse of God's handiwork. In an amazing photo she later posted online. We'll take a closer look at it. You can see the clouds coming together to form a cross as the sun rises from behind. The picture has now been shared millions of times online, and the woman who took that photo, Michelle Laraff, joins me now. Thanks for being with us on Fox and Friends.
Good morning.
All right, so you're just driving along and you see the sun coming through the clouds and you decide to stop and take a picture. Did you even notice that it was in the shape of a cross?
Not when I took the picture, no. Initially what caught my eye was just the sun coming up and the light pillar or sun pillar. And I just pulled off and took the picture and realized after I took the picture that there was a cloud that you know, reflected off of that light pillar and just looked like a cross.
And what did you do with the picture after you noticed that?
Well, once I got to work, I shared it to my Facebook, and then had several friends tell me that I should share it to the news or, you know, something. So I shared it to our local weather station, and here I am.
Yeah, and people, after they see it on social media, they're saying, God is real, thank you for helping to renew my faith, all kinds of very inspirational messages that just this simple photograph that you posted is sending them all this great love from the inside out.